Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are, wherever you are. Today we'll be flashing firmware and configuring the radio control between your drone and your receiver and your flight controller. It's going to be quite a long video, and so I have instructions worked out. Just so you know where we're starting, I'm on a Windows 11 stock machine. Today's August 28th, 2024. The Windows is brand new. The only thing I've installed on this Windows machine is Mission Planner and the STM32 Cube Programmer. Both of these were needed to flash the firmware in our previous video on how to flash firmware to the flight controller. So watch those if you haven't, and make sure you have those installed as a prerequisite for today's install. That's it. That's all we need. And the machine I'm using, like I said, is Windows, and the hardware I'll show you. It's a Surface Pro 9. The processor is an i7 12th generation, 16 gigabytes of RAM. A very standard Windows machine. So let's get going. I have the directions as a PDF on the course for this class. So if you go to my personal website, berklab.com courses, there's a link to this class. And under Files, Config Files, there should be a PDF, UCI Fall Drones, Radio Configure. Download that. And that should be all we need for getting started. Let's open that. Okay, and let's zoom in a little. Okay, so the first one the radio is the Radio Master Pocket Radio. We're going to work on that first, and then we're going to work on the receiver, Happy Model EP2 receiver. So I don't have a video of my hands. I only have the screen recording. So let's take a look at what they look like before we get started. And again, we can go back to the homepage of this class, and there's a link to the Rotor Builds website, which links all the parts for this particular build. So we can scroll down to the radio, and this is the radio. Radio Master Pocket Portable Remote Controller. So here's a picture of it. And that's the radio that we're going to be configuring. And there's many buttons. We'll talk about what those buttons do in a minute. And just so you know, the USB on the bottom is for charging the battery. The USB on the top is for connecting to the computer. So that's our first piece of hardware. So we don't need to do any work, just a USB cable to connect to the computer. The other item that we're going to be working on is the radio receiver, which is Happy Model Express LRS EP2. So here's a picture of it. It's tiny, and it's about the size of a thumbnail. It's very, very light. And you are going to need to solder. We're using the EP2. You're going to need to solder ground and VCC, which is plus 5 volts wire, and connect that to your flight controller to get power. The flight controller has 5 volts on it. And then you're going to need to have the UART transmit and receive here wire soldered to a connector that will connect to the flight controller, transmit and receive for whichever port we're using, and we'll go over that later in this video. So as a prerequisite, you'll have to have 4 wires soldered to these 4 terminals, and on the other end, those will have to be connected to the flight controller appropriately. And today's video is about burning the firmware once you've made those 4 wires. So close all this. So these are the 2 pieces of hardware that we're going to be working on today. So let's start with the radio. It does have an SD card built in, confirm that, the transmitter. And we're going to flash the firmware that controls the radio. It's an open source project called EdgeTX. So if we go to edgetx.org, that is that project. And we want to go to user guide, installing, upgrade, fall instructions for Buddy. So let's go to user guide. And we want instructions on how to flash the firmware for the radio. EdgeTX, how to access blah, 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 blah. Let's see. Installing and updating EdgeTX. Now, typically these ship with EdgeTX already on there, so we're going to upgrade it. And by the way, this is overkill. Usually it'll work out of the box, but I'm going to show you how to start from absolutely nothing and configure it exactly how we want it. So in the future, you can upgrade the firmware or change the settings to your heart's desire. So, but like I said, usually it's not necessary to upgrade all the firmwares. It's just necessary to get the binding and the configuration, but we're going to do it all. Okay, so update from an earlier version of EdgeTX using the bootloader. No, we want to do update from an earlier version of EdgeTX using EdgeTX Buddy. So click that. It says to back up the SD card contents. Before making updates, we always recommend that you back up your SD card contents. So that's what we're going to do. So with your radio powered on, plug your radio in to the computer via USB. So we'll do that. When prompted by a radio for USB mode, select USB storage. So I plugged the USB in, and on the radio screen, it's giving me three options: USB joystick, USB storage, USB serial. Use the roller on the right-hand side of the remote controller and select USB storage, and then click on the roller that was selected. Now it's mounting the it's mounting the SD card in the radio as a device on Windows. So let's take a look at that. Okay, USB drive D, there it is. So I'm going to make a new folder called SD backup. I'm going to give it today's date and time. And all I'm going to do is copy this. So right click, copy here, right click, paste. Control C and Control D also work, but this is a tutorial, so you can't see my keyboard. And this will just be a backup of the SD card in case anything goes wrong. Okay. Done. Now let's go back to the directions. So we did that. Upload bootloader and firmware with radio. Okay, so now we have to disconnect it.
Disarmed. Stabilize mode.
And I probably should have right-clicked and ejected the SD card with Windows, but I didn't. So I'm going to turn the radio off. And now I'm going to plug it in. And you heard a ding ding. And now we're going to go to this website, which allows us to flash it from the browser. We are pleased to blah, 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 blah. So here are the directions for how to use the website. Pick the version you want. We'll pick the most recent one. Pick the radio model you have. We have Radio Master Pocket. Then click Flash to USB. Now, the STM bootloader was installed in our last video. Let's take a look and make sure it's there. Because like many things in life, this radio is controlled by an STM microcontroller. And there it is. So we have that driver installed properly, and that's what we're going to be using to flash the firmware. So let's check the directions before I click flash. And it's telling us to flash. So we'll click flash. Now, add device. We want the STM bootloader. Connect to that. Go to next. Hold your breath, cross your fingers, start flashing. So it downloads the firmware from the internet, erases the previous firmware. Flashes the firmware. And done. So I'm not going to click done yet. Let's see what it says. Start flashing. Done. Your radio has been flashed with EdgeTX. You may now want to set up your SD card. So we flashed the firmware, but the SD card needs to be set up. So let's click done. Oh, and I shouldn't have done that. Okay, now it says unplug the radio from the computer, which I just did. Power it on.
Hey Peter, welcome back. Disarmed. Stabilize mode.
We'll go over the introductory comments in a minute. So it's powered on. Now I plug it into the computer. Now I have to select USB storage again with the slider on the bottom right of the radio. Click it, and now the USB card is mounted. Sorry, the SD card inside of the radio is mounted as USB storage again. Windows does its thing and mounts it. So now we want to update the contents of that card for the new firmware. So we go to SD card content. Still in development. Step 1, power on your device. Make sure it's not plugged in. Step 2, connect your device USB, and if prompted, select USB storage. Step 3, once connected, select the SD card via File Explorer to make the changes, which they provide a button for. So you select SD card, view the File Explorer. So let's select it. There, I selected it. Select folder. Buddy EdgeTX will be able to view the files. Yes. Save changes. Buddy EdgeTX will be able to edit the files. Save changes. Now it asks us what language we're going to use and what our radio is, and we'll say English. Reinstall. Could not update SD card. Could not get SD card sounds. Okay. That is weird. Available sounds. Let's do English. Sarah. Try that. Reinstall. Okay. I don't know what happened, but there's English different artificial voices. Michelle, Sarah, Guy, Ryan, etc. You do you. You pick whichever you want. Unpacking assets. So I don't have my own video production company. This is a one-man operation. So I'm not going to be able to fast forward it. You'll just have to be patient with these things that take time. Or play the video at 2x speed. Boy, it's slow, isn't it? Okay, that should be done. Congratulations, you've now successfully updated EdgeTX. Great. So I'm going to disconnect it.
Disarmed. Stabilize mode.
And I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to turn it on, and you'll hear what it says with that new voice.
Welcome to EdgeTX. Disarmed. Stabilize mode.
Welcome to EdgeTX. So we did this. So we've successfully flashed the firmware for the radio controller. Now I'm going to give you a tip of how to change the startup sound. There's infinitely many things you can do to adjust this. The code itself is open source, and you're very smart students, so feel free to do whatever you want to adjust it, as long as you don't cause your drone to fly in an unsafe manner and you test it before you fly it in the outdoors. So I'm going to change the opening sound. So where's that opening sound? Well, okay, it's on the radio. So if I plug it in to the computer, select SD card, and the SD card is mounted as D, and look inside of D, and sounds, English. I think it's system, and it's called hello. So I play that with media player.
Welcome to EdgeTX.
That's the file that it plays. Now I made my own. That I gave you as an example on the website. So I'll go back to the course website, and you can do any .wav file you want, I think. So I've made my own called hello.wav. I think that's what it has to be called. We're going to download that from the course website. You can use any text-to-speech program that you want. And I used one, I think it was a startup company that was acquired by Amazon a few years back. So let's look at our downloads folder. There it is, hello, and I'm going to play it for you now.
Hey Peter, welcome back.
And my name is Peter. So I'm going to let's copy that to the desktop by Control C, Control V, just for convenience. And now we can go to the SD card. Sounds, English, System. I type H, hello, so I'm just going to drag this new one onto the SD card, replace the old one. And now I'm going to properly eject the SD card and unplug the radio.
Disarmed. Stabilize mode.
I'm going to turn the radio off. Now I'm going to turn the radio on.
Hey Peter, welcome back.
And you hear the radio says, "Hey Peter, welcome back."
Mode.
So that's one way you can configure your radio. You can change any of the sounds if you want.